Hello, dear listeners. This is Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives, bringing you another story about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. I'm your host, Dan Dyck.
There's an old Dusty Millar all alone by himself, and the mill turns round by its own free will. There's corn in the hopper and the flour in the sack, and the ladies step forward and the gents fall back. Sailing eastward, sailing westward, sailing o'er the ocean. Every young man who wants a young wife has to be quick in emotion.
That was Werner Ens singing the Old Dusty Millar on an undated recording. The tune was one of a few popular song choices for Mennonite circle games. Although they're not so well known today, Mennonite circle games were a popular social activity for young Mennonites in southern Manitoba, especially around the 1950s. The games were often played by youth, teenagers and young adults who probably weren't married yet, at informal community gatherings like wedding receptions, known in Low German as Notjaste. Werner Ens kept the tradition alive in southern Manitoba by leading and teaching circle games and memorizing the songs. He recorded tapes of himself singing the songs and explaining the steps. People would invite him to events to lead circle games. He'd bring his own PA system, and his wife Marlene would demonstrate the movements. A 2009 edition of the Mennonite Historian published a photograph of circle games being played at the 50th anniversary of the Manitoba Mennonite Historical Society in Winkler in 2008. It's hard to determine the origins of Mennonite circle games. Most circle game songs are in English, but they have similarities to a genre of High German songs known as Schlüsselbundlieder, meaning keyring songs. According to Doreen, Klassen, an ethnomusicologist, the name may refer to the sound of rattling keys, which was used as a signal for choosing partners in these games. Schlüsselbund songs were adopted by Mennonites in Imperial Russia, who sang them in High German but added their own Low German verses, often to tease specific participants. Like circle games, Schlüsselbundlieder were played at Notjaste. A circle game usually starts with a group of people in a circle, as the name suggests. While singing a song in unison, which is picked from a known collection of songs, the participants follow a specific set of steps that accompany the song. They might link arms with a partner, weave in and out a formation, form circles within circles that turn in opposite directions, and create arches for other participants to pass through. The arrangement of women and men is important, and most circle game songs require specific ratios of women and men. Here's Werner Ens again, explaining some of the steps to the Old Dusty Millar.
For the Old Dusty Millar, it is nice if there are more gentlemen than ladies. However, if there are more ladies than gentlemen, the roles can also be reversed. The game starts with the singing of the song, and as the song is being sung, the circle moves in a clockwise direction. At the words, the ladies step forward and the gents fall back. The man releases the hand of the lady and goes in a counterclockwise direction on the outside of the circle and on an outer circle, and the ladies continue in the clockwise direction in an inner circle, until the words sailing eastward, sailing westward, sailing o'er the ocean. Every young man wants a young wife, has to be quick in emotion. At that point, the gentlemen find themselves a wife, turn around, and then they go in pairs, clockwise, singing There's an Old Dusty Millar all alone by himself.
Some circle games were simple, while others were more elaborate. According to ethnomusicologist Judith Klassen, young Mennonites weren't taught the steps to circle games, but had to learn by observation. For some youth, being old enough to participate in circle games was a rite of passage into their teen years or young adulthood. But it was risky, too. Mistakes could disrupt the whole pattern of the game. This was further complicated by regional differences. According to Werner Ens, bingo is the most confusing game because people from different areas learn the steps a little differently. If this all sounds a bit like choreographed dance to you, well, you're not wrong. Mennonites have long had complex and varied views on dancing. Throughout the 20th century, Mennonite conferences, including the Conference of Mennonites in Canada and the Conference of Mennonites in Manitoba, issued official statements that condemned dancing for moral reasons. These two conferences were more influenced by evangelicalism and saw dancing as a worldly activity. In official statements, dancing was often grouped together with gambling and drinking alcohol. So, were circle games a form of dancing? Well, it's complicated. Despite the official positions of the church, dancing was an important cultural and social activity for some Mennonites, especially groups who were more tradition-minded. According to Doreen Klassen, some Canadian Mennonites, a term that refers to Mennonites who came to Canada in the 1870s, didn't put too many restrictions on entertainment for their youth. While these young Canadian Mennonites may have played circle games, they also held barn dances, where many of them played musical instruments. Once they were baptized and married, steps that signaled a transition into adulthood, they often sold their instruments, leaving their youthful dancing behind. For those Canadian Mennonites, the distinction between circle games and dancing likely didn't matter much. But for Mennonites, circle games were acceptable at least in part because they were viewed as distinct from dancing. This distinction may have been emphasized by youth who participated. In an interview with Judith Klassen, Werner Ens noted that the name circle games isn't really all that accurate, but calling them dances would have invited strong disapproval. Other groups, like Mennonite Brethren, discouraged circle games because they were too similar to dancing, regardless of what they were called. Some Mennonite youth played circle games despite disapproval from older generations. Besides being seen as a gateway to drinking and gambling, dancing was also perceived as a danger to Mennonite values because of the close physical contact between partners. But in circle games, linking arms was usually the closest partners got to each other. And gender played an important role in circle games. Most circle games required a specific ratio of women and men. Some required more men than women, while others needed an equal number. Participants often paired off into couples, or separated into groups by gender. Some circle game songs, like The Old Man Goes A-Courting, have overt romantic themes. Here's Werner Ens singing a verse and explaining some of the steps in The Old Man Goes A-Courting.
As they're singing the first part, which goes, the old man goes a-courting, the old man goes a-courting, the old man goes a-courting, to see his lady love, to see his lady love, to see his lady love. The old man goes a-courting, the old man goes a-courting, the old man goes a-courting, to see his lady love. And during all this time, the one lone old man, or two or three if you have them, is walking in a clockwise direction between the two circles, that is, the gentleman and the ladies facing each other, all the while looking over the possibility of who is going to be his bride. At that point in the song, he picks the girl he happens to be opposite, takes her by the hand, and leads her through the arches. As he passes, not the arches, pardon me, but between the couples, and as he passes every couple, they then in turn join hands behind them, I should say, and they follow along in terms of a wedding procession.
So, for many young Mennonites, circle games were a permissible form of romantic interaction. In fact, Werner Ens met his wife Marlene through playing circle games. Despite the controversy over dancing and whether circle games were too similar to dancing, it seems there was little, if any, concern over the lyrics of the songs. Most circle game songs are sung in English and are all secular folk songs. Some of them, like the song Captain Jinks, have lyrics that seem counter to Mennonite values. Here's an excerpt of Captain Jinks.
When Captain Jinks comes home at night, he claps his hands with all his might. Salute your partner so polite, for that's the style of the army. Join your hands and forward all, forward all, forward all. Join your hands and forward all, for that's the style of the army.
The steps to this song include participants saluting their partners during the line, "Salute your partner so polite." Judith Klassen suggests that while the military imagery in Captain Jinks seems contrary to the core Mennonite value of pacifism, the lyrics of circle game songs weren't scrutinized by Mennonites and were less important than the social role that circle games had as an activity for youth. In Manitoba, the popularity of Mennonite circle games peaked in the 1950s and began to decline in the 1960s. One factor was that evening weddings became more popular, so afternoon wedding receptions, where the whole community gathered together, became less common. Evangelical tent revivals were another factor. The Brunk revivals, led by preacher George Brunk, were specifically targeted at Mennonites. What previously were more lenient views on dancing among some Mennonites began to shift. While many young people continued to participate in the games, they were frowned on more and more as too similar to dancing. But one of the biggest factors, according to Judith Klassen, was the advent of the automobile. Previously, entertainment options for Mennonite youth were limited to activities they could reach by foot, bicycle, or on horseback. By the late 1950s, young Mennonite men began owning cars. Youth could now easily travel to sports games and other fun events, and no longer had to create their own entertainment within their small, close-knit communities. There have been some attempts to revive circle games in Manitoba. In the 1980s, I attended a wedding in Winnipeg that featured circle games. In 2010, the Mennonite Heritage Village in Steinbach launched an exhibit on music. Werner Ens led circle games for visitors at the exhibit opening. To close out our episode for today, here's Werner Ens singing a verse of Grünes Gras, the only known circle game song in the German language.
Grünes Gras, unter meinen Füßen, hab verloren meinen Schatz, werd ihn müssen suchen. Suche hier, suche dort, unter diesen allen, wird vielleicht noch eine sein, die mir wird gefallen. Wird vielleicht noch eine sein, die mir wird gefallen. Sagen tust du ja, ja, denken tust du nein, nein, drum will ich dich lassen stehen und zu einer anderen gehen. Drum will ich dich lassen stehen und zu einer anderen gehen. Komm herein, mein Schatz, ich will dich lieben, du bist mir ins Herz geschrieben, du gefällst mir wohl, ja, von Herzen wohl.
Do you have stories or experiences of Mennonite circle games? If so, reach out to us at info@mharchives.ca. Audio tapes of Werner Ens singing and explaining circle games are held at the Mennonite Heritage Archives. To see photos of circle games or to hear this episode again, go to mharchives.ca. If you have questions or comments about this program, email us at info@mharchives.ca.
Hello, I'm Conrad Stace, the archivist at the Mennonite Heritage Archives. Your donations help preserve and share stories like the one you just heard. To send a gift, visit our website at mharchives.ca and click on Support. Or give us a call at 204-560-1998. Thanks also to our partners, Canadian Mennonite University, the Centre for Transnational Mennonite Studies, Mennonite Church Canada, and Golden West Radio.
In an upcoming episode, Assistant Archivist Sarah Dyck will talk about what she does and how her work helps people who visit the MHA. The Circle Games episode was researched by Kaylee Dyck and Conrad Stace and written by Kaylee Dyck. Thanks to Werner Ens for the use of his recordings. I'm your host, Dan Dyck. Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives will be back next week with more stories about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. Thanks for listening.